Hello everybody and welcome to today's video. We are looking at Captain Tsubasa today. This is a new game that released, I think it was just last week, on PlayStation, Nintendo Switch and PC, and to be honest, I very nearly gave it a miss. I have had no exposure to Captain Tsubasa in terms of the manga or anime property whatsoever. I know it is one of those classics that has been around since the 80s, but I've had no experience of it myself. I've never watched the anime, I've never read the mangas and that kind of thing. And as a result, I assumed that this game was not going to be for me. But then I saw some clips of it in action and it looked really good to me. It looked like this vibrant, high-energy, interesting sports game, and that is not what I expected. Just on the developer involved, for example, I assumed that it would be something different. So the developer is Tamsoft, and Tamsoft is best known for their highly fanservicey games and their JRPGs. And while I knew that this wouldn't be fanservicey as there aren't many girls in it, I did assume that it would have some JRPG elements, and I had in my head that this thing would be a little bit like Inazuma 11, the level 5 series of kind of tactical RPG, semi-football games, but not really football at all. When I saw the clips, I realised that this was actually a proper football game, an arcade take on it to be sure, but a proper football game, and that got me a lot more interested. You can check out my review on digitallydownloaded.net, that goes with this video. I absolutely love the game. I've given it 4.5 out of 5 stars, and the reason for it is, in addition to being an arcade game, it is also a little bit of a throwback to the kind of football games that I used to enjoy, and that's what I want to talk about through this video. So, as context, I've been playing football games for a very long time. I started, I think, from memory. The first one I actually remember playing a lot of was FIFA Road to the World Cup 98 on the Nintendo 64. That was the first football game that I really played a lot of. I had the Game Boy ones and whatever beforehand, but in terms of an actual effort at making a simulation football game, that was the first one that I distinctly remember spending a lot of time with. And the reason I spent a lot of time with it was that it was actually quite accessible, and it was one that my brothers and I could play in multiplayer and enjoy as a thing that we all enjoyed because we liked sports games. Fast forward to today, and I still buy FIFA and PES every year. I'm one of those suckers that actually does get into the whole series and spends a bit too much money on FIFA games. But at the same time, they've put me off a little bit in recent years, and that is because they've become less and less accessible, I found. You can put the difficulty of a FIFA game on easiest and just cruise through without any problem, of course, but if you actually want to engage with the game in the way that the game wants you to engage with it, you really need to master all the complex sets of commands, the pages and pages of manual worth. They're never in manuals anymore, they're kind of like tutorials and little control screens, but there's pages of controls, or the equivalent of, that are built into these games. And to actually master it to the point that you can play FIFA in the way that FIFA was designed takes a lot of practice and time and whatever. And for people who really like their simulation games, there's nothing wrong with that, of course. Obviously, FIFA is a ridiculously popular sporting property for a reason, and I'm certainly not here to criticize EA or Konami for that matter for the direction that they've taken the sports games. People like those really serious simulations. But for me, I like my sports games to be a little bit more accessible. That's not to say that I want a really kind of arcade version of them where it doesn't really resemble the sport whatsoever. I have had fun with arcadey football games in the past, like Sega Soccer Slam and the Mario one, Mario Strikers I think it was called. I've enjoyed those, but they're obviously not football. When you look at Captain Tsubasa here, it's obviously still football. It's a very arcadey take on football, but at the same time it flows like football, it behaves like football. It has the flash of an arcade game, but it has the core experience of football. And for me, that's what I really like. So when you play this game, there are a pass button, a shoot button, you've got a dodge button, you can tackle, but all of that is learnt quite quickly in the space of a few tutorials, really. And from that point on, you have all that you need to enjoy playing this game. And that's, while as a single player game, I guess that's a little bit limited compared to what you can do by the time you've mastered a FIFA or a PES. When you go to play local multiplayer, then this is the ideal way of doing it, because if you try and play local multiplayer with a FIFA game or whatever, the difference in a skill becomes very evident. So if your friend hasn't spent the time that you have to learn the controls and learn the various systems of a FIFA game, then it's very unbalanced and very unenjoyable right from the outset. And EA has tried to solve that by allowing modifiers and things like that, but it's never really the authentic experience. Well, authentic's probably the wrong word. It's never really the genuine effort at a kind of an accessible sports game, which just means that multiplayer kind of gets off the table. And these days, my brothers and I still play FIFA, so we can still get together and enjoy a FIFA game. But for another example, the NBA 2K games, we used to love basketball games as youngsters as well. As time has gone on, my brothers have stopped kind of playing basketball games, but I still play the 2K ones often enough. A little while ago, we just on a whim, we decided to play one of those basketball games, and it just wasn't fun for my brother because he couldn't wrap his head around the controls and whatever fast enough to make for an enjoyable multiplayer experience with me. Even if I was playing, you know, with a weaker team and gave him modifiers, it still felt like it was condescending towards him, I guess. The game was, in the way that it behaved, and the fact that he just couldn't get comfortable with it quick enough. It certainly wasn't an NBA Jam, for example. So that's where I think there is an ongoing value for games like Captain Tsubasa, which is limited compared to EA in terms of its technical mechanics, but limited in a way that makes it more accessible and, in fact, more enjoyable. I would sooner recommend Captain Tsubasa to a casual football fan that was looking to play something and ideally play with, you know, other people, then I would recommend them a FIFA or a PES right now. Those games are great if you've got another person who is as dedicated to serious simulations as you are, but if not, then Captain Tsubasa is a much better choice. Unfortunately, there are issues with the game that I guess are a result of the fact that Tamsoft is a tiny company with a fraction of the resources of an EA or whatever. There aren't that many teams, for example. There aren't that many gameplay modes. As a single player thing, you've only got 2 story modes, and while they're okay and a decent effort, I guess, of taking the anime story and putting it into video game form, there's not a whole lot there. There aren't many teams, like I mentioned. There aren't many gameplay modes outside of that single player thing. So as a single player game, it's got limited shelf life. As a local multiplayer thing, it's great fun, but you know, the nature of it being an arcade game means that you're only going to play it, you know, infrequently. It's not going to be a weekly thing that you play for ages and ages. So you should go in being aware of that. But otherwise, it's a really charming game. Like, the graphics are very bright and colourful. They've done a great job of capturing the aesthetic of Captain Tsubasa and really recreating it within the context of a video game. Captain Tsubasa, like I mentioned earlier in the video, comes to us from the 80s, and anime looked differently then. They've done a really good job of making sure that they've preserved that classic anime look. The stadia are very attractive. They're, you know, there's a great energy to Captain Tsubasa as you play, and that definitely doesn't feel like it's a limited production. Often with these anime tie-in games, they can feel like they're quite limited or done cheaply because they're just there for the fans. But I do think that this game has relevance for people who are not necessarily fans of the anime, because I enjoyed it, and I feel like that I'm certainly not going to be the only person who had no experience with Captain Tsubasa but ended up really enjoying the time with this game. Anyway, that's enough for this video for now. Thank you very much, as always, for tuning in. Please do click that like and subscribe button so you don't miss any of my videos. Please do consider backing me on Patreon if you enjoy my work, so I can continue to grow and support this channel. And otherwise, we will see you at the next video very soon indeed.